So, for today's episode, I have a very interesting guest with me here today. I'm with Breen, who is leading up Qnary. And essentially, the team is, all about reputation management, right? It's an executive on a reputation growth management platform and service. So, we really want to learn from Bant what this is all about, who is really using it, and, who gets, their reputation high with Qnary. So, Bant, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Lucas.
Awesome. Maybe, in your own words, tell us about the company. What is it all about?
We started Qnary about 9 years ago now. It's a company that focuses on executive reputation growth and talent branding solutions. And what that really stems from is our business thesis, which is that every professional, every executive has an online presence, and that presence really matters. It matters in terms of your personal or your professional reputation as an executive, the reputation of your business that you're part of, the opportunities that you'll receive as an executive, as well as the opportunities that your business will receive. And so
Mhm.
we set about building a platform that essentially supports those executives to optimize that presence through kind of optimizing what those executives look like in social media. The platform supports the generation of thought leadership content, short form content, as well as longer form pieces like articles and blogs and video. It also then has a growth and engagement engine to connect that thought leadership content and those profiles with the key audiences that those individuals want to be associated with. What we've found is that there's been a fundamental shift over the last several years where in most companies, there used to be a focus on really just having as few executives speak to the outside world as possible, to one where essentially executives are speaking to many, many different parties and dimensionalizing the story of the brand. And so we've built a platform that supports that exercise to make it possible for businesses to manage that process, but also benefit from it.
Very cool. So, that's a super interesting question for me now. How do executives discover the platform? What's the journey that they go through in order to get started? They're super busy. So, how do they find the time to do that?
Yeah, I mean, almost all of our relationships start with an individual signing up for an analysis of their existing online presence. So one of
Hmm.
the aspects of our system is that it analyzes your existing footprint and generates some thought leadership or some insights from that can be shared with the client, and that conversation then leads to usually like what a client could do and how they can grow it from there.
Very cool. Very cool. Delivering really some great value for the executives and that first step. That's very cool.
Yeah.
What role, and we talked a lot about the website here in the Path from Presence podcast. What role would you attribute to the website in that journey for the executives to get started?
We actually have kind of evolved on the websites, probably like many companies have. Our website now is very, very performance focused.
Hmm.
Definitely not as sexy as it used to be. I think
Hmm.
in the early days we had, tons and tons of brochureware there of all the cool stuff that we were doing. And now you land on the page. It outlines, hey, if you're an executive, fill in this form, and we'll set up a time to walk you through this analysis. And so I think that in a world where people don't have a ton of time to mess about, you want to kind of get them to something that will offer them true value. We're not a group of people that wants to try to I don't know, pull the wool over people's eyes. We're very much is like, listen, this is really important for you to do. This is what you need to do. Send us this information. Let's get going. So, we over the years we've started to apply more and more digital marketing solutions into our website structure. And obviously what you guys are doing at Pathmonk is a great example of that type of work.
Very cool. And for everybody who is listening in and might be interested to get their reputation analyzed, you can head over to Qnary.com. It's Qnary.com. So just for everybody who's listening in who is interested. Great. Yeah. Just, brief follow-up question on the website before we're moving on. I would be curious, right? You mentioned you stripped out a lot of content there focusing on performance. Where do you see the strength at the moment on the website?
So I would say that the strength right now is just the simplicity. My background before I started Qnary was very much in the world of search and SEO and performance-based marketing. And one of the mistakes that companies make is they fill up their landing pages with tons and tons of possibilities for potential clients, and that's a real mistake. When people land somewhere, they kind of really need to be directed to the key action. And so I think honestly, the simplicity of the page right now is probably its strength. Where I would like to evolve it is to go back to some of that content and add that content back in. We're kicking off kind of a big content marketing push this year, so we'll see how that plays out as we continue to build out our digital footprint.
Very cool. Maybe coming back to the product, right? For executive listening in, what would you say is sort of the competitive advantage when going with a solution like yours versus spending maybe a lot of time on building up the reputation manually?
Right. I mean, the reality is that when we started the business, I had to convince people that managing and building up a strong online presence mattered. I would say that 9 years ago, people would I had a big career in advertising before this, and so they would take my meetings and they would smile politely, and then they would probably like curse my name after I left the room. But what has happened over the 9 years is that what the vision that we had has become a reality, where especially now during the pandemic, where people are living and working fully digitally, and so your online presence is really your presence, full stop. And in that situation, it really matters. Now the challenge is that managing that, optimizing that, growing that takes a ton of effort and time, of which individuals don't have because they have jobs, they have things that they have to do. And so for us, I think the key thing for our solution is that we make it very easy for these folks to do this work. We're extremely cost effective. Certainly there are agencies out there that try to do some of the stuff that we do from a technology perspective, but they charge 40,000, 50,000 times more than we do. So
gotcha.
There you go.
Makes complete sense. I would be actually curious, just a sort of a small tangent here, because you mentioned 9 years ago when a lot of people wouldn't not really focused on building up their reputation. What was it that made you believe so much that this is important? Why were you so sure that it's going that way?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a philosophical thing, but at the time, I was highly aware of the fact that brands and enterprises had an arsenal of tools that they could be applying to optimize their performance, to reach customers, and to capture their data more effectively. And what was patently clear is that the individuals out there, the potential consumers, had no idea of the tools that were being applied by these companies. And I realized that whilst from a brand perspective, we might be able to get ever more efficient in terms of how we could reach customers, ultimately we would reach a point where there would be less value that could be created unless executives and individuals became involved in this discussion and they got better and more educated through the process. And so ultimately, I think that's really kind of the philosophy, my philosophy in the company, which is that individuals have to become more educated and more involved in their own online presence if we want to have a truly dynamic, value creating, democratic online world.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I would love to switch gears a little bit and learn about you personally, right? You're heading up the team, and essentially, I'm curious. Like you mentioned, executives being short in time, and probably so yourself. What's the type of content that you still consume, and how do you educate yourself on a daily basis? Like, how do you filter even what you want to read?
So it's a great question. I have found that my media habits have really shifted over the years. I used to be very much of a kind of tier one media consumer. I would read, early in my career. I'm not a 20 something, but early in my career, I would definitely sit down and read like 5 newspapers every day. And I was one of those guys. But what has happened over the years is, as more and more sources become challenged or questioned, certainly some have stood the test of time, right? I still read the New York Times. I read The Economist religiously. I think that's probably one of the best publications that anyone can read. I read the MIT's report, and I also read the Harvard Business Review. Those are kind of like my four like standard things that I look at all the time. But what I've built in relation to really the work I'd say that we do at Qnary is an incredible list of who's the who of every topic in the world. And so I have a very, very curated feed on Twitter as well as through LinkedIn of thought leadership that's truly being done by people that are making things happen. And those are the people I read now, right? So if it's something about marketing, there are specific guys in social media that I go to that I really rate, and I have a feed that tracks tracks their stories. I trust that more than I trust 90% of stuff published in primary and secondary news sources.
Very good. Since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, I would love to jump into our rapid fire questions. Are you ready for those?
I'm ready.
What's the last book you read?
The last book I read, wow, that's a great question. I'm totally drawing a blank.
We can come back to it.
Yeah, I don't have a book that I've read in the last 6 months.
Okay. What's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
So we're doing a lot of work in the machine learning space. So I would say that every part of our profile, every part of our platform or platforms is going through a transformation, applying really kind of the next. We are an AI-based company already, but this is essentially kind of like applying the next generation of that. So that's really kind of first and foremost on our minds.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you want to have fixed for the company?
Well, if there were no boundaries on technology, what would be the one thing I'd want to fix for from a technology perspective? Well, that's a great question. I think we're on the right path on almost all of those areas. That I probably think that the one thing that would happen is we have this elaborate roadmap. It's like at this point, like a 5-year tech roadmap. Mm-hmm. And I think if money wasn't a concern for me, we would be accelerating the deployment of that. We would quadruple our development staff and move faster on those things. That's, I think, the only thing is it would be the speed to market.
Very cool. And the very last question would be, if today would be your very first day, you're working on Qnary, right? So going a couple of years back, what would be the one advice you would give yourself?
Um, if I was starting Qnary today, I I think that I would remind myself that to set up a business, I mean, any business that you go through, uh, there is like, there's your ego talks a little bit in the early phase where you say like, oh, well, there's hardships. However, within 3 years, this company will be as big as Facebook and, it doesn't matter. And I think I would remind myself that, more about the marathon aspect of it.
Gotcha.
And I think that's really just important. It's been a very personal journey. I would say one thing that relates to the world of PathMonk that I think you guys might find interesting is that I came into the business with very much of a marketer's mindset. I'd spent the majority of my career in digital marketing and digital advertising, and I was very aware of things like customer relationships and how to build those and cultivating those via services organization. And I find myself 9 years later very much a numbers guy, like very much about the number of calls that we do, the number of leads we generate, the number of impressions, like very, very quantitative. And I found that transformation in how I think has been profound.
That is a fantastic answer. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate that you took the time with us on PathMonk Presents today. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting everything that we discussed about Qnary today, what's the one thing they should remember?
They should remember that their online presence really matters. It will impact their life and their career and the success of their business. And so it's worth making an investment in.
Thanks for being part of PathMonk Presents today.
Cheers, Lucas.